So to give a little backstory, this happened when I was 7 or 8. It was the mid-2000s, and I was in Poland spending the summer with my grandparents, as I usually did every year. It wasn't until a year or so ago that I finally realized how scary and dangerous this encounter really was. I was at a store that happened to be on the corner of one of the main streets in the town, and I was waiting outside for my grandma to finish up her food shopping for the week. A few minutes passed, and a bald man in a red car drives up to the curb and rolls down his window. He asks me what I'm doing and how old I am. Me, knowing the rules about stranger danger and whatnot, I stay silent. Instead of taking a hint that I'm not interested in having a conversation with him, he keeps pestering me about where I'm from and what I'm doing alone next to the store. The next thing he said gives me the shivers every time I think about it. He said, "I can drive you anywhere you like. I have kittens in the car." But it didn't end there. He kept pressuring me to get into his car, and I finally said, "No, I'm waiting for my grandma to get out of the store." Right as I said that, she thankfully came out of the store with groceries in her hands and ran up to the car to ask what was going on. The man started turning red and stuttering, saying he was just concerned about me and was worried why I was outside a store by myself. When the man said this, my grandma turned white as a ghost and tugged me closer to her. Then she muttered some profanities to the man and pulled me away while quickly walking away from the car. Now that I think about it these days, it's really disturbing to know that if I had said yes to get into his car, something much more sinister would have happened. So to the bald guy in the car who wanted to kidnap me for who knows what, let's not meet again. This happened to me and my girlfriend on October of 2017. The leaves were changing color and the weather was starting to get colder by the day. It was raining pretty hard, and we were driving in the dark on our way back to a haunted attraction to celebrate the upcoming holiday. In all honesty, we just wanted an excuse to get scared and leave the house. While I was driving, I glanced at the rearview mirror and noticed an old red Chevy pickup truck was behind us, following incredibly close. When I got to a multi-lane road, I expected him to pass me as I assumed he wanted to go faster than the current speed limit. Well, I was wrong. He stayed behind me. It was a little unnerving, but I brushed it off. We got to the wooded road that led to the haunt, and I noticed that he was still behind us. Again, I brushed it off and figured that he must have just been going to the haunted house as well. It's a very popular haunted house in my area. We pull in and we can see the attraction. We saw a huge barn-looking building and a glowing violet and blue sign that read, "My Morbid Mind." We had been there every year since it opened, and every year was better than the last. The security guard tells us where to park. Once in our spot, me and my girlfriend put on our coats and head to the entrance in the pouring fall rain. We bought our tickets, and we were shocked to see that this year, because of the new It movie coming out, the theme was 3D clowns. Now, my girlfriend hates clowns. She's been terrified of them as long as I can remember. She's been terrified of them as long as she can remember. We're standing in line, and she pulls out her phone to take a picture of us to post to our friends and family on Facebook. Right as she does, this clown comes up behind us and photobombs our picture. She was so startled that when she noticed he was there, she impulsively slapped him. He stood there for a good 15 seconds just staring at her, looking into her eyes. Creepily, he just tilts his head and walks away. Throughout the haunted house, my girlfriend felt uneasy. Of course she was afraid, but she had an unsettling feeling. She kept telling me how she felt bad, and thought she should apologize to him. We got to the end of the haunt, and my girlfriend got chased by clowns with chainsaws until she got to the parking lot. Now, the parking lot was bordered by fence posts, so people couldn't disturb the grass that surrounded the gravel area that was the parking lot. I caught up to her, and I could feel her heart drop from her chest when she saw the clown from before sitting on the fence post staring at her alongside another clown. They said nothing, they just stared at us. I looked in their direction and asked, "Can I help you?" And they said nothing. I said, "Hey, can you knock it off now? You're really scaring my girlfriend." He looked in my direction and laughed. A maniacal laugh, almost like the laugh you would hear from the Joker. We walked past, and they got up and all started moving towards us, following us so much so that we could hear their footsteps behind us. We speed walked our way to the car, and we saw that the mysterious Chevy truck parked across from our vehicle. The Chevy truck was parked in a way that whoever was inside could see where we went. My girlfriend had had enough, and we got in the car to leave. Just as we left, I looked in the rearview mirror. They were standing there in the middle of the trail that leads to the main road, the two of them, just staring behind us. It was almost like they wanted us to know that they were watching us. To my horror, I realized he had a big butcher knife in his hand, and it didn't look like a prop at all. If it was, then I would be genuinely surprised. Its metal exterior glistened when another car's headlights hit the blade and the clown submerged into the corn. 3 years later, we are still getting strange phone calls from an unidentified number. Sometimes it's laughter like we heard that night, and sometimes it's a man's raspy voice saying, "I see you." I will say this, though, I have never seen that red pickup truck again. I just want to start off by saying that this story may be a bit fuzzy because it happened a few years ago. If I'm going to guess, it happened when I was 12 or 13. So on this particular day, my brother, mom, and I had a dentist appointment. My mother and brother were scheduled before my appointment, so that meant I had to wait out in the waiting room alone. So I was waiting. I was on my phone playing games and browsing the internet. I don't know how long after I was waiting. Sorry, it's been a while, and I have forgotten some of the details. If I had discovered Reddit back then, I definitely would have posted this. Anyway, after a little bit of waiting, an older man who was probably in his 50s or 60s comes in. He looked like a stereotypical pedophile, and that freaked me out, I'm not going to lie, but I tried not to be judgmental. He then asked me questions. I can't remember many of the questions he asked. Again, sorry, but one question that struck me as odd was, "Where do you go to school?" Now, at the time, this might sound stupid, but I told him out of fear he would get angry and possibly hurt me. So fast forward a few minutes later, at least what I think to be, and he tells me I looked puzzled. I was just scared and on edge because this guy who fits my description of a pedo is asking me where I go to school. Now, I know this guy could just be bored in the waiting room and just wanted to make small talk, but why to me, a 12 or 13-year-old at the time? I didn't tell my mom or brother because I was afraid I would scare them. So, yeah, that's my story. Definitely not the scariest one on this sub, but I wanted to share it because whenever anyone asks me of a scary experience that happened, I always think of this. I live in Southern Oregon, a beautiful place in the West filled with some of the most beautiful forests one will ever see. The national forest I live against, I know like the back of my hand. I know stories from long ago about places in the middle of nowhere that have strange names, and that often draws me to these places to explore and feel nostalgic. These forests also have things about them that are off. Locals talk about how people disappear all the time in these woods, sometimes over drugs, sometimes over foul play, and other times people just go for a hunt or hike and are never seen again. Just disappear without a trace. I have spent years in the deep wilderness hiking almost every day. The incident I'm about to tell you changed how I felt about the forest. My roommate and I left our home in the outskirts of the forest for a hike to a place that's basically a swamp flat. A small area of marshy swamp in a bowl-like canyon high up in the mountains. There's one road in and one road out. As we climbed the mountain, the rain had started to pick up. It had been mostly drizzle that day, but living in the Pacific Northwest, you get used to that, and it doesn't stop you from adventure. We finally get to the flats, and it's time to explore. We walk the trail into the flats, and as we admire the old growth trees surrounding the marsh, the wind starts to pick up. There was a nasty storm coming in. The trees started to rock back and forth and make a horrible snapping sound. And there isn't many safe places in the forest like this to take shelter from falling trees or branches, so we decided it was time to hike out. We hiked back to the car, and were relieved to get in it and out of the storm. The car was parked in a small turnout on the side of the road. We sat there for a few moments in the car, taking off our jackets and turning the heat on and such. And that's when this truck pulled up. In the middle of a bad storm, in the complete middle of nowhere, a really old beat-up pickup truck drives up and parks in front of our car. Not completely blocking the car, but coming damn near close. A burly man steps out of the driver's seat and turns to look at us. I have to say, this is the only time in my entire life that I have thought to myself, something here is not right. The look on this guy's face gave me that instinctual feeling of fight or flight. As we watch him walk around his truck, I tell my roommate, just go, start the car and leave now. As he starts the car and begins to pull off, the man was reaching behind the seat of this truck and pulls out a long rifle. That's when my roommate hits the gas and flies out of there. As we pull away, the man pulls the gun out and points it in our direction and looks me right in the eyes. The feeling I got was you are going to die today, and I will never forget the look on his face. We got home and told our neighbors about the incident, and then proceeded about our day. When we got into the car the next morning to drive to town, the starter failed on the car. I often think to myself, had it failed up there or had that bad storm not come in and shoot us away, things could very well have gone south that day. This is going to be a somewhat long story, but the context is important into understanding why it's creepy. This was over 5 years ago, when I was still living with my parents. I've always been a night owl, and used to enjoy going for drives at night on the desolate country roads, and smoking a joint and listening to some music. And this was one such night. I ended up on my way home around 3 a.m., 10 minutes away from my house. I passed through the country roads and turned back into my suburb. Keep in mind, the street I live on has over 200 houses. Turning onto a side street, I came across my first car on the drive back. It was a black SUV up ahead of me. I noticed it's traveling extremely slow with their high beam lights on. This is a suburb with streetlights everywhere, not a foggy night, etc. About 10 miles per hour. I decided to keep my distance as my right-hand turn was coming up and I would soon be clear of them. They proceeded to take the right turn up ahead that I was also going to take. I continued to follow them at a distance, as we were now on the street that I live. The eerie slow driving with the blacked out SUV and bright floodlights was already kind of freaking me out, but as I approached my house, where I park out the front against the curb, keep in mind this is a 95% empty street, with curb parking the entire way, the black SUV literally signals and pulls into my exact parking spot. I'm now approaching slowly toward my house, and they are parked completely still, lights now off. Even though I was confused as to who exactly was waiting at my house, I pulled in behind them and began to exit my car. At this moment, they accelerated hard and pulled a complete U-turn, and then sped away at high speeds with their lights off completely. I also could see in through the now open window what looked like agents of some kind, and they seemed to be taking photos of my house and of me. Really, it was just freaking weird. Even though nothing really sinister happened, the whole circumstance, the coincidence that at just that time in the morning on a completely desolate night, I would be guided home by a strange vehicle that looked and behaved as if in a movie. There's no reason I can think of that I would be target to an investigation. I've witnessed a UFO once in my life with 3 other witnesses, but that was years before this. Not sure if I should be excited that I have a story to post here, but I thought it was interesting enough to share. For context, I am male. This happened earlier today. I have just started working at a pick and save as a cashier, and today was my 3rd day on the job. About 20 minutes until the end of my shift, I was helping a fellow cashier bag for some customers. One customer was an elderly gentleman who had been quiet during the transaction and was staring at me the whole time. After all of his merchandise was in the cart, and I was about to bid him farewell, he asked me if I was in college. This didn't strike me as odd in any way, because he was older, and in my experience, the elderly like to get to know people, so I enthusiastically informed him that I was not, and I was going into my senior year of high school. A few minutes later, I clock out and head to my car, and this is when my alarm bells start ringing. He's right outside the store, and I'm not sure if he was waiting for me or if it was simply coincidence, but what he said is what freaked me out. He asked if I was the person that just checked him out, and I confirmed and asked them if there was something else I could help him with. He said no, but then asked when I had clocked in. I answered because it seemed innocent enough, and then he mentioned that he thought I would be working until 10 p.m., why he thought that was completely beyond me, and then proceeded to ask when my next shift was and what my schedule looked like for the next couple days. I honestly didn't know as the schedule hadn't been posted yet, but even if it was, I was not going to tell him because why would he want to know or need to know that information? This may all be in my head and definitely not as creepy as some other posts, but in my opinion, it was quite creepy. This old guy seemed way too invested in my work schedule after asking how old I was. Hey there, friends. I hope you all enjoyed this collection of creepy stalker-esque style stories. Some of them are more just creepy encounter style, but I think I'm going to stick with the stalker theme on this one because most of them were kind of stalkery. Yeah, so I hope you guys enjoyed that, and if you did enjoy it and would like content like this or content that is so vastly different, it's like comparing, I don't know, pool noodles to bass guitar. Please consider joining the Nevermore. To do so, all you have to do is hit that subscribe button and the bell icon next to it, and that makes you part of the Nevermore. You can do things to support the Nevermore, such as following me on Twitter, Facebook, and Reddit, as well as supporting me through Patreon or Ko-fi, all of it optional and all of it extremely appreciated. All of that said, my friends, I hope you're having a fantastic day, and I hope things get better if they're not going your way. Yeah, just chin up, you'll be alright, I promise. Alright guys, much love. See you on the next video, but until then, sleep well.